In this video we're going to discuss a little bit about the LCD programmer here, which is the LM5. It displays all the information that the computer, well not all the information, but a lot of the information that the computer is receiving from the engine sensors. So if we just turn on the main power here, and I just come down and turn on the ECU power, and I'll leave everything else off at the moment. The initial screen that comes up is the standard SDS EFI EM5, and it gives you the firmware and the actual serial number of this particular unit. So what we do is ignore all these buttons around here. Do not fiddle, do not play with those. The only ones you want to be working with is push gauge once, which brings up gauge 1. Now in gauge 1 we get to display the manifold pressure. We'll get to display ET, which is the engine temperature. Down the bottom on the left is RPM, and on the other side is air temperature. Okay, so they're fine to have. Or if you want to look at gauge 2, which will then tell us the state of the knob, which is currently at 10%. If I just rotate this knob over here, which is the air-fuel ratio, you'll see the values change. And if I come over to the lean side, they turn into negative numbers. So negative numbers means a leaning state, and a positive number means an enrichment state. And if I come back over here and just put it on to 0, it shows back about here. Okay, so there's just 3%. It's just pretty close. It's just like that. You could just turn this on if you wanted to set it into the 0 state. Okay. And down the bottom on the right hand side is ignition timing. Okay, if we push this button one more time, it goes to gauge 3, which I would say would be the one that you'd fly with the majority of the time. It's top left is battery state, 13 volts. Top right, TP, which is the throttle position, and if I advance the throttle here, you'll see the TP number going up and then coming back down again. And full on the left hand side down the bottom down here is O2, which is the air fuel ratio. Now that will not read unless you have turned on the oxygen sensor switch here, which I've got turned off at the moment because we haven't got the engine running. Whenever the engine's not running, just turn this in the off state. It will save the sensor's life, because it's not going to be running the preheater and trying to burn it out all the time. And the other bit of useful information on this particular dial is the barometric pressure, okay, of the day, which is at this stage is 29.7. Push this dial one more time and we get to what I class as my tuning dial. Gives me manifold pressure, RPM, ignition, and the air fuel ratio. Okay, now a word with the O2 sensor here is that when we first start it up, it's in the 0 position. The engine will start, and we'll monitor that. So at an idle with full retard, you'll probably see a number of about 17 to 18, which is okay. And as you advance the throttle, you'll start seeing it go down to about 13 or 12 or something like that. For takeoff, part of the takeoff drill is that when you have this running up to about 2400 RPM here, you will lean this off to about where it points to the A. You don't have to even look at the dial, you can just set it to A, and that is your pre-takeoff, part of your pre-takeoff drill, because that will give you maximum air fuel ratio and give you the maximum power available out of the engine. If you leave it in the 0 position, you're sacrificing a few horsepower. Not the end of the world, can be left there for just normal training purposes in flight. When you're in flight, you can set that knob so that that reads 13. If you have it set at 13, it's slightly enriched because stoichiometric is about 14.5, 14.8, something around there. But we're never going to run our engines at that. We're running them too lean. We will start noticing a power drop off. If you run it at 13, you'll be having a nice number on there, 13.1, 13.2, somewhere around there. and you can find that by either one of these dials here. So see, by pushing this again, because I didn't push the gauge, I've now gone into the setup screens. Good point. How do we get out of that? Push gauge again, and it'll take us back into the gauge setup. So like I went through this, gauge 2, 3, 4, keep going, magnet windows, LCD brightness, LCD contrast, rah. If I wanted to play with those, they're all set to maximum at the moment anyway. Gauge button select. Don't fiddle with these settings. If in doubt, push the gauge button, and it'll bring us back to a gauge state, and then go back to here. Okay. How do you get from 3 back to 2? You'd push that one. So retarding the push, advancing the push. Okay. There's 4. There's 3. There's 2. Back to 3 again. Alright, and these are quick returns. So 1, 2, 3 basically is all you're going to be really needing. Okay.